Xenia, thanks so much for agreeing to chat with me today. You are a church planter, you are an academic, and you are connected with the Free Methodist Church. Can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and anything that I missed in that really brief intro?
No, thanks for having me. So a little bit about my community. We're about 15 to 20 people. We started in the beginning of the pandemic, which I think everybody keeps telling me was a bold move, but I actually think it was sort of the right push in the right direction.
Mm.
Um, and we started with about 10 people, less than that, maybe about 8 actually. And we've lost some, we've gained some, and it's been a very interesting time. So as for what's working, I should probably say first that my community is full of people who are done with church, but they're not done
Okay.
with Jesus.
Mm.
So that's probably the clincher, that we're a community of people who really want to be in healthy community with one another, but we're not really quite sure how that all fits with how we've been hurt. So lots of things come up, particularly around our baggage. We're unraveling it, bringing Jesus back into the center of our worship. We celebrate the Eucharist as often as we can.
Mm.
Um,
Even online?
yeah, even online. I
Really? Huh.
I'm a big fan of embodied worship. And I think that that's a crucial element to the Eucharist. But I figured if, Jesus is coming back and what we have is a pale shadow, then we can settle for the pale shadow of the Eucharist
Oh.
until we can celebrate it for real.
Mm.
So yeah, we have the Eucharist at least once a month. Last month we had it twice, 3 times, including Easter.
Wow. Mm. What's the format of your worship times? How do you meet together, and what do you do?
It varies from week to week. Our first week is usually sort of a remembrance. We think and reflect back on the last month of what God has been doing in our lives. We celebrate the Eucharist. Our second and fourth weeks are scripture. So we're in the book of John right now. We've got it sort of structured like a Bible study, but most weeks we actually end up doing Lectio Divina or Visio Divina. So my church is pretty big on the spiritual disciplines. And then the third week we do Story Sunday. So we talk about where we've come from, or traditions that we've been thinking through, or what we've been learning, or even just where do we see God at work in our lives today. So that's really how the month goes from month to month.
It sounds so beautiful. So traditionally, when I think of a pastor, I think of someone who prepares a sermon and does the message and makes sure that everything is very ritualized. But it sounds like your activities or your role as a pastor is slightly different than traditionally. So how's your pastoral role expressed?
So our church is, I was going to say a little bit different, but at this point, I think we're totally different. We've kept sort of the bones, and then we've kind of fleshed in other little bits in between. So we believe that we serve the body by our strengths and our gifts that God has given us. So mine are in teaching. My other gifts are in vision and planning. As crazy as this sounds, on my leadership team, I'm the most concrete sort of person. I'm these are all the things that have to get done. Most people think I'm really abstract, which is fair. I'm doing a doctorate, but and then I have a co-pastor. She's in charge of the pastoral care. So she's the one who's checking in on people, visiting with people, praying with people. And then our third pastor, who is currently on sick leave, she's our admin person. She's a wonder. She's going to handle all of our paperwork and make sure the money gets settled, and that I don't have any of the brains for that.
I getcha. Where are you meeting right now?
We're on Zoom every week, like clockwork at 7:30 in the evening.
What day? Sunday?
Sunday.
On Zoom. And everybody turns their camera on. If somebody doesn't turn it on, is that okay? Or
yeah, we have Oh, I should say this, like part of our church calendar is that we've made sure to schedule stuff like Nap Sunday. We borrowed that from Eucharist Church in Hamilton.
Okay, Kevin Makins. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
seen him do that. Yeah.
So our policy is you come as you are. If that day you want to be with us, but you're lying in bed, that's fine. You can turn on your camera, you can turn off your camera. Um, Most people don't even fully speak up. A lot of them will just type in the chat and we'll have a free flow conversation that goes in the chat and on camera. What I love most recently is we've been kind of giving ourselves a headache trying to figure out the captions for Zoom. Because up until a couple of weeks ago, they didn't have captions. You had to transcribe everything yourself or find a third party transcription service.
Oh, I've never even used that before.
Yeah.
Interesting. So that people who are hard of hearing or don't want to turn their volume on can still read what's going on.
Yeah.
It's very accessible.
Yeah. So
you're doing your PhD, you're an academic, and you're doing this church thing on Zoom with people who are done with church, but not done with Jesus. How does all of the things that you're learning translate into the real world? I'll just leave it as broad as that, and you can go wherever you want.
When I came into seminary half wondering what it would look like for sort of the theological fabric of Canada to be renewed. I'd grown up in a non-denominational church, and I mean they call themselves non-denom, but they're a denom, and I didn't have any church history in my sort of backpack. Like I didn't know anything about anything really beyond the basics of evangelicalism. So, you know, I prayed when I was little to welcome Jesus into my heart, and I learned a little bit about what I didn't like about Christianity, but beyond that, I had no idea. Oh, well, I learned about Luther and Calvin, but they were really distant figures in my head. And you know, like when you're growing up, you have these like church classics that you got to read of biographies. So I'd read those, but in general, just nothing. But I wandered in and I fell in love with the scriptures again in seminary. And it was the first semester I just learned Hebrew. My professor saw something in me, said, "Why don't you just go for this paper?" And I just fell in love. And that's the kind of love that I want to see brought back into the church. That's why I'm studying. I think that any sort of academic worth their salt actually needs to be involved in the church, because what are you writing for if not for the church? Like that doesn't make any sense. So I want to show people what it looks like to love God with your mind and your heart. I don't know about the strength. I've got none of that, but I'll leave that for other people.
Very authentic. Wow, it's really inspiring to hear from you. I think that you're right. There's something really special about starting a church in the pandemic to meet the needs of people where they are right now. As things loosen up again and as our world continues to change, do you think that how do you think the thing that you've created is going to translate into an embodied community? Are you concerned about that at all? What do you envision?
When I first started thinking about this church plant, I'd had a particular section of Richmond Hill in mind. Anybody who knows me knows that I love new urbanism. So I'm always thinking about the design of a neighborhood or the city. I'm fairly active in keeping tabs on the politics of the city and the new bylaws that are going in. And the new thing in Richmond Hill right now is affordable housing, which I think is great, but there's lots of issues. So I'm keeping a tabs on that. But the thing that gets me is my people aren't ready to be together yet. And the thing that I learned in my Old Testament class in my first semester of seminary is one quote from the Epic of Eden by Sandra Richter, and something along the lines of when God's people lived in tents, God lived in a tent, and when they moved into houses, God moved into a house. So God always meets people where they're.
Where did you go? Oh no,
it
you've got to start again because you blipped out and it was so beautiful. Just go back to
the quote.
when yeah, start at the quote if you can say it as
Yeah.
great as you did before.
Yeah. I don't know where. So there's this quote from the Epic of Eden by Sandra Richter, and it's something along the lines of, when God's people lived in tents, God lived in a tent, and when God's people moved into houses, God moved into a house. And it's this sort of notion that God always meets people where they're at. And I think, as much of an idealist as I am, and I think about what a perfect church is, well, there's no such thing as a perfect church. As a pastor, I am called to walk with God's people where they're at. And for the moment, it's meeting online. And at some point, we will start a service in person. It will look different. I've been thinking about what it looks like to even choose to move into a condo and then, meet in one of those main rooms, right? Like those meeting rooms, and just have church in a condo, right? So I don't know is the truth. So I have value for meeting physically. It will happen at some point, but for now, we will continue online.
That's really inspiring. Are you worried about the church in the future? Are you worried about the church, Xenia?
Um, I don't think I am. I think uh, I'm more worried about people stopping this, or trying to stop other people from following the Spirit of God who is at work. I think God is always at work. God is always calling his people together. God is always calling people to himself. When I think about prevenient grace and all the things that come with that, the longing that Jesus has for his people, I think, no, I'm not worried about the church. What I am worried about is people hampering the witness of the gospel, so to speak. But even then, to quote the Chronicles of Narnia, Aslan is on the move. Like, are you going to stop Aslan? I don't think so.
Amen to that. I'm with you, sister. Blessings on your ministry. It's so good to hear from you and to be inspired by what you and your community are doing.
Thank you.